Steel Curtain is the new for 2019 roller coaster at Kennywood in West Mifflin, Pennsylvania. It is the tallest coaster in Pennsylvania and also breaks the American record for most inversions with 9. That's pretty impressive. 4,000 feet of track, max speed 75 miles per hour, is also the largest roller coaster ever built by S&S worldwide. This is going to be my full in-depth review of it based off of my experience on the roller coaster. That is the main thing that you're going to have to keep in mind with this video, because my experience with this ride was not the best. I only got one ride on it, which if you know me, I like to get multiple rides on everything because I feel like then that gives a more accurate review, because I can say I will have done it in multiple seats, in different times of day, and really get a good feel for it. If you ride a roller coaster for the first time, that's when you're really taking everything all in, and your second and third rides, that's really when you start to enjoy it and get a good feel for it. Unfortunately, I did not get that opportunity. When I went to Kennywood, it was operational for less than 2 hours out of the entire day. I'm lucky I got one ride on it at all. It was actually the first public train of the day. So as you can imagine, it was running slow. Coasters speed up throughout the day. It's how they warm up. So I am well aware that the coaster is probably going to be running faster than it did when I rode it. But one of my main takeaways with the coaster was I did not think it had the best pacing. It has 9 inversions, but the first half of the ride, up until when you start to stray away from the main layout, it was not going through those inversions at a particularly fast pace. You were just kind of gliding through them. So to me, I actually preferred the second half of the ride over the first one, because that's when you start getting lower to the ground, it takes the elements a bit tighter, and so you get a little bit more whip to it. But in general, I would not say that this roller coaster is a ride where you really feel that speed. Earlier, when I was taking a look at the stats right before this review, it actually surprised me that this coaster goes 75 miles per hour, because it does not feel that way at all. 220 feet in the air, yeah, you feel that. I mean, it's pretty high up there. You climb up at a pretty steep angle. You get a great view of the surrounding area. Yeah, it feels pretty big, especially since this coaster also has the tallest inversion that is right after the lift hill. It pretty much also makes up the drop. This coaster doesn't really have a drop. You go through the inversion and you never quite level out. You just keep descending. You actually kind of twist to the side and then you go up into a banana roll over the lift hill. That's your first main element. That's 2 inversions. So if you're keeping track, by the end of that element, you're at inversion number 3 of 9. It's a very cool looking element. It's menacing, but to me is not the best inversion on this ride. And I'm not even sure I would say the first inversion is the best. That first inversion is very tall. It's cool. I've been told if you sit in the front, you get some pretty great hang time over it. I would not know what that's like. I rode in the back, so I got pulled through it, which was cool. But unfortunately, I've been told from some people that this is a front row ride. So again, it kind of shows that my experience in the back is not necessarily going to be the most accurate to talking about this roller coaster, especially since in the back, it also has a considerable vibration, which for a brand new roller coaster, how exactly that happened, I'm not sure. It is something you notice. I think depending on how much you care about a rattle or vibration, it may or may not affect your ride experience, but either way, you will notice it. So to me, it did not feel glossy smooth. I imagine if you sat in the front, it probably would. But anyways, getting back to where we were, after that banana roll, it actually does a little step down as this cool little pop of airtime, because even though this coaster is all about the inversions, it does have a few airtime moments. The next element is called a rollover. These are another 2 back-to-back inversions. The coaster starts off as an Immelman and then ends as a dive loop, so you just keep twisting. It's kind of like a sea serpent roll. That is the pair of inversions that is directly under the lift hill and drop. And I would say, interestingly enough, the next series of elements is my favorite part of Steel Curtain. It is the part of the ride that is not part of the main structure. When you see Steel Curtain, you see the huge section of the ride that is directly to the left of Racer, and then it spreads out, goes over the pathway and by the lake. That portion is my favorite. There is an airtime hill, which is a great airtime moment, if I might say. Really impressive. A dive loop, very fun. Little section of straight track as it kind of glides on the water, which is neat. And then it flips you into a 0G stall over the pathway. So if you're standing on the ground, you look directly up and see the riders flying above you. That is awesome. That is a very cool moment. So yes, that part of Steel Curtain is my favorite. It's made up of an airtime hill and 2 inversions. So if you're keeping track, we're now at inversion number 7. We have 2 more to go. That is going to be a corkscrew, and then you're going to end it with a cutback. But those 2 elements are not necessarily back to back. After that 0G stall, when you rotate out, you do a step up into that corkscrew, and then you do kind of like a half helix into the cutback, and then that's when you twist in the brake run. So in terms of layout, the first half I would say is graceful, and then the second half you get a little bit more whip in the elements. I commend them for the number of elements that they were able to incorporate into this layout. There's so many. I really do think that they did a good job with what they were given, especially since they had such a small space to work with. The fact that they packed in that much of a ride in there is good. That being said, I would not really call this coaster intense. That's not a word I would use to describe this ride. If you want intense, I would say go ride Phantom's Revenge in the same park. So to me, the way I view this ride is just a standard looping coaster. It's a sit-down looper, and to me, that's about all it's good for. It's a nice filler ride, but I did not think that this coaster was anything to rave about. I kind of walked off and I was like, okay, yeah, that was fun. It was solid. But it kind of left me wanting more, which is weird because you'd think 9 inversions, how could you want more? But I could just feel like there was something missing. Not necessarily in terms of an element, but I think I just felt the ride was lacking in the positive G-force department. You had a few negative moments, which were surprising to me because I went in saying, okay, this is a looping coaster. You're not really going to get any negative G-forces with this ride, but surprisingly there are. There's some good moments, but with positives, I think that's what kind of disappointed me. I just didn't feel as much force as I would have liked. Like if you ride a good old-fashioned B&M sit-down coaster like Kumba is the ultimate example, those things are intense as heck. This ride, not so much. Maybe that's what Kennywood was going for, but it does make me wonder if another company other than S&S, if they had done the same layout, if it would have been more intense. Like give this to Intamin or even Gerstlauer. Something tells me I think the coaster would have been a bit more intense. And that's not saying that S&S can't do intense coasters, because obviously you have rides like Dodonampa and Max Force out there. But with a ride style like this, I don't know. So that's about all I have to say for the layout. Few other points of note. This coaster is a big old part of Steelers Country. Steelers Country was not open when I went, so I'm not really going to talk about that. But when you enter the queue, you won't really see any theming there. It's just a bunch of switchbacks. When you get to the station, all the ride ops look like refs. They're playing the Steelers theme song as you're going up the lift hill. And they have a big old banner on the station, but that's about it in terms of theming. They're using the Steelers name, but I feel like the coaster isn't as themed as maybe it could have been. I was definitely expecting a bit more, especially since there's so many switchbacks. You would think they'd have at least some sort of theming elements in that general area, but I guess they're probably saving it for Steelers Country specifically. But there is a big gift shop as you walk out that does have a lot of Steelers theming in there. So I guess you could say that counts. But last thing I really want to talk about is the trains. They're pretty comfortable. One of the things that I really like about it is the restraints, not necessarily actually because of the restraints. There is a shin guard, which is not really comfortable. But the reason why I like it is because the lap bars lock once you're strapped in. The restraint is not going to go down any further than it already is. It locks in place, so if you have some room, I imagine that you could get a pretty great ride experience on this roller coaster. But to wrap up this review, for Steel Curtain's final score, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. Now I know what you're probably thinking. Okay, that's kind of low. But to be fair, I was not super impressed with this ride. And I'm not saying that because I'm bitter because I only got one ride or it closed or anything. When I got off, I felt like I was just expecting a bit more. I was like, okay, this was my most anticipated new for 2019 roller coaster in America, and that was it. Like, I was just a little surprised that it wasn't as good as I was expecting. And I imagined that if I rode it a few more times, my opinion would change slightly and maybe I would give it like an 8. But I still don't think that I would be giving it a 9 or 10. So in general, I would say this is a coaster that is worth going out to do, especially if you're in the area. If you're a big football fan, I mean the Steelers, it's cool that Kennywood finally has a big old new roller coaster, especially something so huge such as Steel Curtain. And with such a unique theme, I can see why this coaster is getting such long lines. I don't have any problem with that, but personally, in terms of ride experience, it left a little to be desired. So I imagine that I will eventually go back there. I'll get a few more rides in on it, but I still stand with the statement that this coaster is a good addition to the park. It's a very weird looking ride. It kind of works because Kennywood is a very quirky park and this is a quirky coaster. So even though it looks out of place, I think it kind of works. But nonetheless, they needed this ride. I think it is a good supporting ride in their lineup. But for me personally, whenever I go to Kennywood, I will still be spending most of my time at Phantom's Revenge. So that's going to do this for the Steel Curtain review, the new for 2019 S&S roller coaster at Kennywood. Let me know down in the comments below if you agree with my thoughts. If you think that I'm crazy and you absolutely disagree, you can post all that below. And of course, stay tuned for more reviews here at Coaster Studios, and I'll see you guys next time.